Well, we'll go ahead and get started there. I understand that there, Ms. Deborah was telling me there's some people might be lingering in the exhibit hall to show up late. That'd be fine. We'll go ahead and then I'm going to keep an eye if people actually show up for the Zoom part. I will grab the microphone out so that they'll be able to hear. Otherwise, if you don't mind, I'll just speak from here. I think my first teaching job was in the middle of Bangkok in an open air classroom. So I learned then how to project my voice across some new things already.
The app says that your stream is live, so you know.
So, and it's be on WIOA too, right?
WIOA
WIOA. Are there attendees on WIOA?
says they can't tell them yet.
All right. Well, I'm just gonna speak with this just in case. My apologies if it's a little loud. They're still having a party out there. Thank you, Bill. Appreciate that. Well, welcome. My name is Jeff Hutchison. I am the Director of Advocacy and Public Policy for TESOL International Association. And some of the pre-conversation before everyone was filtering in, I realized that I probably need to explain the TESOL International Association. Some people have a good understanding of it, others do not. I just came off a conference a couple of weeks ago. We had our conference in Long Beach, so I just dispensed with telling people about TESOL because I was at TESOL. I thought, well, that'd be kind of it. But TESOL International Association has been around. Wow, we're going into our 60th year since 1966. And we have grown over the years to the point now that we have representation all across the United States. We have membership everywhere. Majority of membership is here in the U.S., but we have, I think, membership covers over 70 different countries outside the U.S. We had 66 countries represented at our TESOL conference just a couple of weeks ago. I have the honor of serving on advocacy, but also working with our affiliate network across the globe, which takes me in advocacy in a lot of different directions. It's a really unique opportunity I have with that. So today I want to talk about elevating adult multilingual learners through advocacy and policy. And I apologize because I left off the title, a key word for, at least for me and TESOL space, and that is the word multilingual learners of English. So technically 2 words I left off. And we have adopted that phrase over, even English learners to highlight the multilingual aspect, but also the fact that individuals learning English, especially here in the United States, are different from someone, if I'm taking French or Spanish or something, I say, oh, I'm a multilingual learner. It's a different context, different motivation behind that. So we wanted to highlight that aspect of that. Also, a very key point in this, when we've moved to multilingual because especially when we're talking about advancing literacy and learning, multilingual learners of English already, most of them are literate in multiple languages. So saying that they have limited English proficiency as well. Okay, that might be true on the English part, but these individuals coming with a wealth of assets and knowledge just from their own background and what they have. So I realize, my apologies, I left off of English, but that's why I'll shorten that to MLE throughout, or I'll forget and say the whole thing as we go through. We'll see how that goes. That's my computer. Okay, get the right one. Oh. There we go. I got it. Got the record. Yeah, one of the key things I often joke about, but so I think the more I joke about it, is just reality. I really need to advocate for digital literacy. And can't even operate a clicker. So before we jump in, well, this is just a quick overview. You can look at that, read that, whatever. We may get sidetracked on a few things, which I think is great, especially in a small group, especially if you have questions, things you want to bring up. I'd love to, go off track a little bit and talk about that. But a little sense of where we're coming from. How many Well, let me just ask you, what areas in the United States are you working in right now? Or maybe it's across the globe. I've got New Hampshire. Where else? Hmm? California, Michigan, Wisconsin, Maine, Massachusetts. Okay. Very good. So we got a little mix of everywhere. National. What about back here? Massachusetts National. Okay. Now, another question. How many of you are in the classroom teachers versus administrators? Classroom? Class, classroom and online? Program administrators? Okay. And national, what's the role in the national?
Research and policy efforts.
Wonderful. But you can come up and do this. Okay. What's your role? Oh, okay. Wonderful. So as we go through this, we'll be talking a little bit about what association advocacy means, and then we'll kind of get drilled down into some of the things that are, I think, more practical, hands-on. And just a little background for you, in this TESOL International Association, when it comes to policy aspects, primarily stays at the federal level. We are focused on English. Our mission is advancing in the English language teaching profession, serving multilingual learners of English in a global context. So our advocacy work will first and foremost look to the professional development aspects, what we can do to shore up, teacher pipelines, build your own programs, working with some of our affiliates now, just initial conversations, especially at the state level on licensure, especially on adult ed and what that requires, because it varies across all the states. And what we have there, when we go to the states, we like to lean on our affiliates, the state level at that level. We do not do policy outside the United States. We do not have a bandwidth for that. We will work with ministries of education, trying to come alongside and bring resources, but not in a policy context, but in a resource context. And I always like to say, when I talk to partners, different colleagues, associations, I have to laugh because they'll come in and say, whoops. They'll come in and say, well, I have a policy team over here I need to talk to, or I need to talk to my legislative team. And I'll look around and say, well, I'm going to talk to my team too, and I'll get right back with you. So it's the bandwidth is an issue there. So a lot of what we like to do is lean on our members and volunteers to help in that. So bringing together more resource, the human resources aspect of that. And a little bit about TESOL. This is it. How many of you have been to a TESOL conference, TESOL International Association conference? How many of you there were a couple of weeks ago in Long Beach? Okay, good. All right. Oftentimes when we get feedback at TESOL, say, oh, you're too pre-K through 12. Oh, well, you're too higher ed. Oh, well, you're too international. And then we look at our makeup of what we are, and we're all of those. And I asked to get some demographics. This was last year's survey. This year's actual went from 29% to 28.4. So technically it's 28% now. But those reporting, TESOL members choose adult education as their area of work. And I say that because I want you to know that TESOL is not all about pre-K. I mean, we do a lot of, when we talk about policy at the federal level, and especially right now with what's going on in the U.S. Department of Education, a lot has been focused on pre-K through 12 public education. But we have higher ed, we have community-based programs, we have adult ed that we cover, as well as research. Can't forget research. I'd be remiss if I neglected that. So just a little bit about TESOL. And then feeding off of that team part, we do not work in isolation. We work with our partners. We feel very strongly that advocacy cannot move forward unless we are working together. And two of the key coalitions that we work with in the adult ed sector, National Coalition for Literacy, and the Adult Literacy and Learning Impact Network. As a matter of fact, two key people with these associations, well, Deborah is, I guess I can't, you're formally the executive director, but led for a long time the National Coalition for Literacy. And Sarah Casisio is the director for the Adult Literacy and Learning Impact Network. Both of whom have sessions coming. I think you have one at 2 o'clock, Deborah, and tomorrow the all-in sessions at 2 o'clock tomorrow. Yeah, yeah. So I want to, because I'm going to put another plug in, not to diminish what you have there, but the plug in for Sarah, because there's a lot of key data that All In has basically, convened together. We conducted, was it 3 surveys around adult ed from the employer standpoint, from the policy maker standpoint, and from the prospective adult learners. So if you're looking for data, looking for information to help inform your own advocacy that can drill that down locally, please go to that 2 o'clock session tomorrow. There, you'll find that in the things. And then we also bring in our own resources. I say our own resources. We curate resources. Some of these resources are ours. There's a lot of great information out there, and so we want to make that available to membership as well as to public. Everything that we do at TESOL is available to the public around advocacy. A lot of things when you come in, you have membership, you have access to research, you have access to professional development, but advocacy is one that we don't put a membership tag on. So those resources are available and accessible. We have an advocacy community that's open to all as well, part of our social platform. So just want to put a plug in for that, because advocacy does not happen alone. So if you are engaged in advocacy with local, state, whatever level, it could just be in your own institution or maybe it's your own home, finding those that can come alongside you and walk with you in your advocacy efforts. Don't feel or don't think that you have to do that alone. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things happening at the federal level. We'll get to the craziness in just a moment. I say craziness, the shotgun approach that we've been looking at over the last few, well, almost 100 days, 90 something days that we're in right now. Come on in. So I'm working off 2 computers here, so I want to get to my notes. Okay. At the federal level, really we're talking about authorization and appropriations. Authorization through WIOA, the Workforce Innovation Opportunity Act, Title II of which is the Adult Education and Family Literacy Act, and that is a key source for what the appropriations process brings. Now, right now, there's a lot of limbo going on, a lot of, big question marks. So if you're keeping up with it, WIOA reauthorization almost happened at the end of Congress last year. It did not. There are talks that it may have opportunity to come back. There are some issues with Title I that need to be resolved, but there's a lot of people in the Congress right now would like to have that, but is there enough to have a critical mass that can get that over the line? We're going to be monitoring that at TESOL, and actually I've talked with Deborah, talking with Jan Fantine of NCL. We're going to be trying to put a strategy together, and if there's opportunity that we can get grassroots campaigns together to help put this over the line, you'll be hearing from TESOL. We'll put that out. There will be a shameless plug later. I'd love for you to sign up for alerts for our advocacy. I always tell people, our membership, we have membership of TESOL International Association is half of the subscribers in our alerts. So we have double the subscribers on our advocacy alerts than we do in our membership. Now, I wish that every subscriber would be a member, but that's not realistic. But we'll have that a little bit later. We'd love for you to sign up for alerts. So when something like that happens, you can get that. I promise we don't spam your inbox. I don't send something out every week or every day. I try to keep it, once a month at most, unless something is going on, and it's usually a call to action in that. It's not a long, lengthy update. It's a call to action so that you can contact your member of Congress in moving that forward. The appropriations process, you may have heard, we have the Fed finally funded appropriated the funds to keep the government running through the end of the fiscal year. End of the fiscal year, September 30th. we were March 14th, we were a few hours away from a shutdown, but they passed an appropriations that there's not much detail in it. A lot of it is top line. And the state grants of AFLA, generally, I think the past 2 years have hovered right at 715.5 million. The assumption is that will continue, but unfortunately, with the context, we have no idea. We absolutely have no idea because it's a top line number that doesn't get down into that specificity. So we'll see how that unfolds going forward. And we haven't yet even started talking about fiscal year 2026. Generally, the president's budget would be out by now, and Congress would be, working together nicely to get the no, I'm sorry, that's a different reality. Yeah, but they'd be working together on fiscal year 26. Unfortunately, it's not too unfortunate. I mean, generally, when you have an administrative change, the budget doesn't come out immediately. Usually, a budget's going to be out in March, February, March. But when a new administration comes in, it's a little bit delayed. So that is kind of understandable, but in the context of everything, yes.
Just a question, trying to learn more about the process of WIOA appropriations authorization because now it matters.
Mhm.
So obviously it's been through the state. We've worked with our state office in the past. We asked the question this time, do you already have the money or is this subject to jeopardy? When do the states typically receive their allotments? Because our program year starts in July. That's when our state's fiscal year starts. So we're that's the question on my mind.
Yeah. Deborah, you want to grab that?
Right. No,
When Octave was fully staffed. They put it out in two pieces to the states. So the first part comes out in the summer, so that you have your funding because of the July 1 versus September 1 issue. And then the rest comes after the 1st of September. So the states are forward funded for part of the amount. So you should have that. And I don't know, and I don't know what percent that is. And also I don't know in your particular case what your state match is. I mean, your state has to make a match. It's a requirement. But the issue, as Jeff was saying, is that we don't have in the budget that we're currently operating on, there is no level of funding specified. There usually when they do a continuing resolution, they specify all the levels. They just cut and paste the budget from the prior year. They have not done that. So they're keeping their options open for what they can do funding wise. Are you going to talk about block grant? Do you want me to talk about?
Go ahead.
So one terrifying possibility, in my mind, is that they will decide that all of the education block grants will be pushed into one. So each state, instead of getting individual block grants for adult ed, for ESEA, for each state will get Blanc, a big block grant. And then the state will be in charge of deciding how it divides that out. Now, depending on your relationship with your state, I could see most of you aren't smiling.
No.
That tells me that you don't have strong relationships with your state education department. That could be a real issue, depending on which state you're in, how that gets divided out, whether they just decide to go with what they had last year or change it.
Yeah, and
we don't know whether that's going to happen or not. I mean, all of these things are speculation.
And I think states are already for the elementary, secondary. I know some states have already asked for waivers. There are some already asking for block grants. A couple of weeks ago at our conference, I told our state affiliates, I said, you've got to ramp up your state advocacy because if it goes that you've got to be at the table at the state, and that's because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And it's especially appreciated for those. Especially in public education, we got a tax or challenges, I should say, to access to education, which is protected under Plyler v. Doe. And there are several states that are trying to challenge that right now. Then you got a civil rights issue. There's a whole mess of things with that. So, great question. It led to some important points.
Further clarification, in the case of adult education, The other thing that matters, depending on which state you're in, is where your adult ed is sitting in your state government. So is it in the education department? Is it in the labor department? Is it in higher ed?
The funding comes from the ed department, but it's administered through the labor department.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's a,
so that means there are at least two tables that you have to be at.
yeah, and forgive me, I don't know.
No, that's fine. Like I said at the beginning, we can go off on the road. I have no problem with that.
Michigan, LEAs are capable of receiving state funds, and that qualifies as a match, because in the CBO, we only receive WIOA funds. And we are working on everything to change that. But should we?
The state itself has to report to the feds the match that it provides, however it provides.
Okay.
So it's really like whatever is true in your state.
And what state are you again? Michigan.
Sorry.
No, that's right, no,
What?
Federalism.
Actually, let's make sure we connect, because I've been in, our state affiliate is really ensconced on the adult ed side, and especially about correctional facilities and ELs and correctional facilities. So I'd like to at least get us connected on that. Okay, so when it comes to federally funded programs, all of what we already spoke about was adult education in general. But when we look specific to multilingual learners of English, the importance of this is really magnified, because you look at WIOA funded programs, the percentage of those adult participants in the programs in some type of English is pretty high. Matter of fact, the most recent data from 21-22, it had at 56%. So if you go to the NRS aggregate tables, you can get that. You're not going to find that chart, because I took the aggregate tables and made a chart out of it in Excel. So, but anyway, that's why I did that, because it just brought them all together. And so you can see that line that goes across is the percent of those that are MLEs that are adult ed participants in the programs. And that's just federally funded programs. That's just federally funded programs. There's so much that we don't know when we look across the United States about the number of MLEs, in need, accessing programs, don't even know that they can access programs, and that's true not just for MLEs, it's true for all of adult ed. There's so much that people are not accessing them, not participating in there. Yes, and we're gonna touch on a few things like that. I got two computers. All right, so some other data to try to put that in context. What we don't know. Just some things off the NCL website. You'll see that you've probably seen these quotes before, but I'm talking on the right side, over 40 million adults in the U.S. cannot read above third grade level, and nearly 63 million cannot do fourth grade math, and fewer than 10% of adults who can benefit from literacy programs participate. And so that's the bigger context. Then you say, okay, well, what do we know about MLEs in this? Well, we can look at some aggregate data. Migration Policy Institute, if you're not familiar with that, it's great data, especially if you can drill down to your state, especially in your advocacy work, to find out numbers and that help inform your stories that you're telling. But ages 18 to 65, foreign-born, there's 19.6 million that are considered limited English proficient. And that's, if you look at it overall from ages 5 up, it's almost 23 million. It's 22.4, 22.5 million limited English proficiency in that. And I think that number is probably not right, because the last data from NCLA, National Clearinghouse for English Language Acquisition, had I think 5.5 million children in public education. You look at age 25 plus that are foreign born, there's 10.4 million that have less than a high school diploma in this process. So not just limited English proficiency as that's described, but also lacking credentialing in high school. And one thing that's going to lead to this other discussion that Deborah was mentioning about people being afraid to access there is a conflation that if you are an MLE, you are also in this country unlawfully. And that is not the case. Taking the data from Migration Policy Institute, I don't have this up. I should have put it in the chart. I had it in my notes, but if you access the slides, you have my notes in the slides too. So you'll see that there. It said, yeah, it says U.S. born, this is all from Migration Policy Institute, U.S. born limited English proficiency. There's 5.4 million that are U.S. born. Foreign born, there's 22 million. But of the 22 million foreign born, almost half are naturalized U.S. citizens. So you can comfortably say that the majority of MLEs are actually citizens of the United States, not just residents, not just people here on a valid visa. They're actually citizens, either born here or naturalized. And yeah, I guess so. Mm.
Say one thing about this slide.
Yes.
Put that information on and see on the website. That information on the right is based on the survey of adult skills that took place in 2017. There is a new one where the data came out in December of this last year. And now that number is considerably higher, 40 million is considerably higher than that, it went from 19% to 28%. And on the subject of 10% who can benefit, actually are participating. I don't know, Sarah, where are we now? We're in 3%, 4%?
Yeah, yes, less than
Really
4%.
It's really low.
Yeah.
So there's just not any bandwidth in adult education to serve.
Okay. I think libraries lost some funding or something too, didn't they? Yeah, I am. Yeah. So in context, you have $715.5 million. We'll see. That goes to state grants that then is rolled out into LEAs, CBOs, et cetera. However that is structured in your state. But the need out there for MLEs is substantially more. And I don't even have the data. Maybe I should add this into the programs that are serving. You know, that's maybe another area to look at. So I'm just focused on the learners themselves. Now, we'll probably spend the rest of the time on this slide. But to talk about some of the challenges, messaging and your own advocacy and caution. And I'll start with the bottom one, because we just came off of that, and that's caution in the rhetoric. I was on one of those calls. Jeff, you may remember that call. I think someone was concerned about that in our advocacy, that there is such negativity towards those that are undocumented, which then is conflated to anybody that doesn't look like us, whatever us may be. And then you point out that the majority of the adult ed participants are MLEs or English learners. And then that person said, well, any MLE English learner therefore is undocumented. You know, they have taken some steps that are just full of fallacies, but that is seeped into the national record, national rhetoric. So it's very concerning about making sure that in your advocacy that the messaging is accurate with this. You have to change hearts and minds in this process. You do that through data that we just talked about, but you also do that through stories. Stories that might be your own personal one, or stories of your students, stories of those that have gone on, success. You define success. There's a variety of things for success, but those people that are contributing, they've participated, contributing to, economically, societally, elevating those stories to help change that narrative. I know that's one thing I'll just briefly talk is our concern at the public education level, elementary, secondary, especially in threats to Plyler v. Doe, and how we put out a positive narrative for our learners. So challenges. Let's see, where do we start? Uh, um, I'll just go through some of this. We'll talk about some of the funding cuts in just a minute. The programs, and well, that may be a good point, good space to talk about, because I think we're going to get into some other advocacy areas here. But you just mentioned the libraries, MLS. There have been, the Voice of America. If anyone uses the Voice of America, they have some English resources that are used. A lot of educators use them in their classes. IES. Funding, that was big news, $900 million saved. And then, just a wealth of information lost when that funding was cut. Just conversation before, Deborah was talking about was the CREATE, CREATE. Yeah. That's an IES project. The State Department also put a lot of pause on their funding. That impacted TESOL. We do a lot of teacher education through State Department, but there's also regional English language officers all over the world. And they are still functioning, but not quite as active. We did not have the participation of that group in our convention a couple of weeks ago as we normally have, because there's been a lot of pause in that. And I know links, information, a lot of the projects have been cut. Jeff, I think there's a project going on, or Sarah, maybe the project to try to collect that information, resources to keep it. AIR, okay. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
20 were taken down shortly after inauguration, but most of the resources have been
Okay. So the funding was one of the things that right out of the gate that started to get cut, but then the executive orders started piling up. We, as many associations, have moved forward with the values of diversity, equity, and inclusion. One of the EOs was targeting that, is even getting into our professional development around social emotional learning, SEL, as something to be cut. So we're working with our program providers and how we can navigate through this. Then came, I say the first big one for us. Well, it's a big one. They're all big. I'm not trying to compare one to the other. But there was the protective and sensitive areas memo that was set aside. Are you familiar with that? Okay, that really goes to the heart of what Deborah was talking about, and people are afraid. This was an initiative excuse me, that's an incorrect word. This was a policy guidance that was put in place, I think the first one I saw was back in 1993. But it was recently reiterated under the Obama administration in 2011 and in the Biden administration. Now, I say that with a kind of a smile, because I was running a bunch of schools in 2009, 2010, and Obama was in, and I was trying to tell our schools what to do if Immigration and Customs Enforcement shows up, because the policy was ignored at that period at time. So TESOL put together a resource page that collected information, because there's a lot of information that organizations, legal, practical, et cetera, on how to navigate this. If you work with any type of schools, having a protocol plan in place if immigration shows up is a necessity for that. But essentially, the setting aside of the memo allowed ICE to come in, Immigration and Customs Enforcement to come in non-exigent circumstances. So in other words, they could conduct arrests and raids and things without, could just be following through with, it had to be a judicial warrant. But they had that leeway now. Well, what that led to was an outcry. We put together resources. I think we did a webinar to help our members, people, just trying to navigate through this, make sure we got resources at all levels of education out there. If it's still up, I think I have a link to it a little bit later in here, but we still have that up. And it's available, it's accessible to anyone. You can go and look at that, again, legal sources, templates to use, et cetera. But what it led to is the SBIOT, Representative SBIOT out of New York, District 13, I believe, sponsored the Protect Sensitive Locations Act. So essentially a bill that was put in place, or at least introduced. Let me correct my phrase. A bill that was introduced that would make that memo, codify that memo. Now, it has a whopping, I think, 40-something co-sponsors, all of them with big Ds, not Dallas. Thank you. But Democrat, I have reached out to my my representative, who is a Republican. He's very empathetic behind the scenes, but not going to be putting his name out there to co-sponsor. So it's a challenge right now, but it is a bill, something to hang on to, something to at least knock on a door with and present. So that was one of the one that came out. Then the other one was the EO that designated English as the official language of the United States. Now, I don't know how that impacted you. I know several states actually have English as the official state language. I think someone said, I think 30 states have that. I know Arizona still has an English-only policy for their public education, led to, was it last year, year before, their superintendent, anyone from Arizona? No one from Arizona? Led to their superintendent denying access to dual language programs by English learners because we have English only. They have to learn English before they can take a dual language. It's twisted logic, but anyway. It rescinded the executive order from Clinton in 2000, 13166. I think that's right. Which was an initiative to open up language access for limited English proficient individuals. Matter of fact, one of the outcomes of that was the lep.gov website, if you're familiar with that. And you can access that, and you can see the language access plans from the different agencies. Now, the executive order on English, designated English, did not say, oh, get rid of the language access plans. It said just stop in your efforts. We're not discouraging you, but some of them have already taken some of their help down. I know USDA had something in multiple languages that was taken down. I know Homeland Security has stopped offering some translation services. So this is impactful. You said, well, it's not in a classroom setting, but it's impactful to your learners in this process. So, yes.
So there's significant research, as you know, significant research showing that use multilingualism, translanguaging, you're actually able to increase your English language skills. Was there any use of that research in trying to push? I feel like that doesn't seem to come up a lot, and I was curious if that's even well known by folks that are changing or they just don't care.
Well, yeah, I can't comment on most of that question because I'm not privy to that. What I can tell you is the last administration, the Department of Education had as their mantra that the bilingualism, multilingualism was a superpower. There was a lot of great work that was being done at all levels in support of this. There was Octave was working on immigrant integration. There was the EARN project. EARN project. A couple of others. I know public education, all these infographics, which had all of that research. Most of that is still there. It's still available. But your question is, was that considered in the I would assume no. I mean, they got rid of all IES. It was all that. Yes. No, please go ahead, because I'm just floundering here. I don't know the answer.
So say that it looks like they basically went through all of the executive orders that Biden had put out because they wanted to undo all of them. And so this executive order is just undoing Biden's affirmation of Clinton's affirmation that federal agencies, so all of the work that was done on what's called language access, translation and interpretation services, to ensure that the civil rights of LEP individuals are not blocked in terms of them accessing federal programs. So all of this dates back to 1965 Civil Rights Act. So all of those requirements follow that federal money down to the state and local level. They still hold, but what the Clinton executive order said was that it applied to federal agencies themselves. And so if a federal agency was running a hotline or a federal agency was publishing some documents, they had to make sure there was language access to them. And so it's just undoing that part of it. And then as Jeff was saying, it says to the agencies, this doesn't mean you don't have to do it. We're going to have new Department of Justice guidance. So that's what one thing, everybody's expecting that'll dial down things a little bit in terms of the formal requirements. But it's really just about what the federal agencies own directly delivered programs. So this is the whole problem where people talk about, don't kind of like obey in advance or whatever the expression is, it's being overinterpreted. And it does not have anything to do with instructional programs for English, for example, other part of the law, other things, right? So it's really just the federal agencies who are not doing much really related to language access for many years.
Thank you, Marge. And going off that, when we talk about executive orders have they're not the law. They have the force of the law behind them and they guide policy at the federal level, but it's not the law. That's why everything being challenged now is in litigation. You've got all these actions and the EOs being litigated. It would be nice if there could be congressional solutions to these, but right now with the impasse of what we have in Congress, I don't even have the slide up, just showing about the shift in power on both. But you got a very thin majority on the House side, I think 2 or 3 right now, very thin majority. There's some special elections coming up, 2 in Florida in April. And then you've got Representative Grijalva. I don't know when that special election is going to be from Arizona. And then the recently deceased congressional rep out of Houston. I don't know when that one will be either. And then we did think that, I can never pronounce her name in New York, Stefanik was up for UN ambassador, but her name got pulled. Okay. And it's a very, very thin. And then on the Senate side, you've got to have 60 votes. And the Republicans do not have 60 right now. I think it's 53, if I remember right off the top of my head. There's 48 Democrats, and then there's 2 independents that caucus with the Democrats. So that's kind of the balance of power. And if you hear a little bit, this is unrelated to this, but if you're a policy geek, I'm not. I just know the kind of top line. But there's the budget discussions going on right now, which is it's a whole separate thing from appropriations. But it's doing a lot of shifting that would impact MLEs, especially those who are undocumented or all not lawfully present on their access to some public services, SNAP, CHIP, Medicaid. I don't remember all of it, but could impact because it's shifting money towards border security and other areas with that. But that's going on right now. And again, that's all top line. But if they do what's called a reconciliation, they can bypass that 60 vote to ram that through. That's about all I know. So don't ask me details on that, how that works. My master's.
That's looming again.
Oh.
Don't be a public charge. Don't be a problem.
There won't know what public charge is. No. Okay. Yeah. I'll Deborah, you can fill it in, but I'll speak of it from a perspective because I worked a lot with non-immigrant students. And if you come in as a non-immigrant student, there's a path that you could go and eventually you probably apply for your green card, your permanent residency. But in that period of sojourn, they will go back and look and see if you've been a public charge. In other words, you have taken money from the public in certain things. It might have been some welfare is the public benefits. Thank you. That's a better way to express that. A lot of people, especially at the public school level, are concerned because I get benefits, but there's a lot of exemptions at the elementary and secondary level for them, and I think some of those might be part of that discussion. Is that what? Okay. Well, see, that's it. The parents are part of the involved in that. Uh, and that would make you ineligible, whether you're filing for permanent residency or, I don't know how it pertains to asylum process. I don't know if it would disqualify there. I don't know. So do you know, Marty?
Yeah, you're not eligible for any benefits as someone who's unauthorized or and the like. And so it's really just a problem it's been very overinterpreted. And so, or not overinterpreted, it's been very misunderstood. And like people saying it's in English only, executive order, it's not. It's English is the official language because there's no real power to make English the only language that's spoken or that things are translated into. But so public charge, I would say generally don't need to worry about it. It's just if a person is trying to apply as a citizen or as someone who's already a lawful permanent resident to bring someone into the country. That's the only time public charge is actually a consideration.
Well, I had a real chilling effect last time around, though.
Well, why did it have a chilling effect? Because there was all this misinformation.
Right,
Everybody
exactly.
overinterpreted.
That's what we.
But anyway, like even in the immigration session we're doing tomorrow afternoon, we're not talking about public charge. Like it's just not it's not an issue to worry about in this context. All of the other deportation stuff is, but not the not public charge really. We have
Yeah.
enough to worry about already.
Yeah, don't need more things to be nervous about.
Yeah.
Thank you, Marge. I appreciate that. Well, I do know, but my students used to be scared of it when they were. Yeah. Yeah.
The
Yeah.
fear.
Yeah.
But but definitely there's, it's really about Medicaid and Medicaid and a few other benefits.
So finishing up on the language access, I talked about the protected areas. There's policy now out. There are talks right now that we are hopeful that there will be a bill on language access introduced. There's been a couple of representatives working on it. I don't know how widespread, what support it is, what it would look like necessarily, or how far it would go. It may just be symbolic. A lot we don't know because we haven't seen it. It hasn't been introduced. But if that comes up, and that would be something else, we might send you on an alert. Say, hey, voice your support for this with your member of Congress. And Jeff, I'm glad you're in here because the next one is talking about. This is Jeff Fantine, who is the executive director for National Coalition on Literacy. Jeff, thank you for being here. I don't mean to put you on the spot, and if you don't want to talk, that's fine. I've got your notes here.
I do have a couple of comments about, are you going to move away from the EO on English?
Yeah, I'm moving away. I think that horse has been beaten enough.
Well, I can say two things. I wanted to ask if I wondered if Puerto Rico has made any kind of official, like, has their governor or anyone made a statement about that executive order? Because, it seems like that it would have that order would have a huge impact on
their representative did. I remember that when it came out. The representative did. I can't remember the representative's name, but he did have a statement on it. Now, as far as the local government, I don't know if they've said anything.
The other thing I just wanted to mention for people who are interested in doing any kind of messaging in the upcoming appropriations process, it looks like we're probably going to have to fight for adult education services. And consistent with the EO, if you take the language that's in the first paragraph of that, I mean, it falls right in line with what we do. I mean, it says, I've been using it in my letters to them, to members of Congress over the last couple of weeks. Speaking English not only opens doors economically, but it helps newcomers engage in their communities, participate in national traditions, and give back to our society. This order recognizes and celebrates the long tradition of multilingual American citizens who have learned English, gained citizenship, and passed it on to their children for generations to come. That is literally from the EO, and doesn't, I mean, it's like, this is an ad for adult education. So take it right, especially to our Republican members on the committee. This is right from, you want to support the president's, support adult education.
And I will just say, just because I work in literacy, I also think it's all the more case for why we need to cover something.
Oh,
Absolutely. But I mean, a lot of people don't make it.
Yeah.
So I think that it just highlights that
Absolutely.
intergenerational.
Right. So I just wanted to say, to encourage folks to, because messaging is on there, it's a good thing to use in our messaging in the weeks, ahead.
Thank you.
Now,
No, Sarah had her hand up.
The whole other model, a whole other model to explore in a different session. But one of the Academy of Hope, which is in Washington D.C., that many of you may be familiar with, they were able to raise their funding from 1.2 million to 19 million annually, over changing into a charter model and other, funding revenue opportunities. And how did you make your case? We talk about children. We say, if you want to improve children's literacy, children's learning outcomes, support the parents, the whole family needs to be included. So I think, with this time period where this could be a very strong message.
Sarah, that's an important thing to understand about that vessel, Sister Johnson.
Yes.
Particular and wonderful representative for adult education. But the District of Columbia has a very liberal law about charter schools that allows adult education schools to be charter schools. So they have what we would call state funding, although the District of Columbia is not yet a state. Along with Puerto Rico.
But I'm saying how her messaging.
Yes, the messaging was important, but the messaging that underlies that is the messaging about charter schools and what is possible for charter schools in the state, and how the state supports charter schools. So there's a whole complex of issues there that's really important to understand. We're blessed in the District of Columbia to have that support for that.
My only add to that, Jeff, and that's my plead, if you will, and that messaging is that second part of that EO was about the language access. As Margie pointed out, it wasn't a directive to get rid of it, but it's so vital to the learners you're serving, especially if you have families, that they understand what's going on and they don't, they're not, well, whatever, proficient in English yet. So, we still need those mechanisms, and we need to elevate the assets of the learners that they have, of what they're bringing to the table as well, because I just don't want that to get lost in the messaging there. So yes. Yeah. Oh.
That's the reason for that term, is because of asset-based wording that we saw was important. But a lot of those terms are seeming to be words that are not able to be used anymore, right? So I'm wondering how you and your organization are trying to toggle between knowing that language is, words mean something, and so, language is power. So you can't just go back to a deficit-based name for something, but at the same time, certain terminology is from the woke left or no longer. But how are you were you trying to, do you know?
Yeah,
What were you trying to-
Yeah, I'm sitting here thinking, because I don't know if there's an actual answer in terms of the nomenclature we use of multilingual learner of English. There definitely is in our professional development on social and emotional learning, which we have that both for adult and K through 12. Because that is one of the targets in that February 14th OCR memo. If you're familiar with the Office of Civil Rights, on February 14th, they sent out, I call it the snitch memo. Basically, they set up, well, now that wasn't the snitch portal, then the memo. Those are not official, yeah, okay. Marty's correct everything, but anyway, the February 14th letter was to say, we're gonna pull funding if you are operating with the woke words, and SEL came out in a questionnaire afterwards that would qualify in that. And it's up to institutions. Now, a lot of it generally is hitting the higher ed, but it's also in the elementary and secondary as well. What do they do with it? And you know, they're having to answer that question. We are having to answer the question, okay, because we deliver that to a lot of LEAs, SEA, well, not so much SEAs, but LEAs and our communities and work. So are we having to change name on that? How do we go about it? I do know that we're not changing anything right now. You know, TESOL as an association has limited funding from a federal source. So we're not crawling in a hole like, oh, we got to change if we're going to exist. No, we have a diversification of revenue. So we're okay. And we don't want to just all of a sudden give up our, you know, if we give up our values because of a dollar sign, it wasn't really a value to begin with. You know, that's me personally talking. No, it doesn't necessarily answer your question. I will say at 2 o'clock today, there might be a session which even goes a little bit further in having those right words and what those words mean and how we describe, right, Deborah? Yeah.
Before the 20th of January, 2020. So it's not about the words that Jeff was just talking about, but I will address that.
Oh, I didn't mean to put you, okay. All right, so now back to putting you on the spot. So numbers, the other big one was two things. One, the reduction in force for U.S. Department of Education, and then the executive order to go forth and try to dismantle it. I got it was your email. You gave us an update, Jeff, about how it has hit Octave. And I think you said it went from 23 to 8, 23 people working at Octave to now 8. And they're right now doing assessment of critical functions. I didn't want to just read the whole thing. Was there anything you wanted to highlight as far as the impact for Octave there?
I think, you know, one of the communications that we keep hearing from the Department of Ed and from any executive that will speak about it is that all of the programs in the Department of Ed have not been affected. And we just heard it again this past Friday, where when a letter was issued by the Secretary of Education saying the critical functions under Octave have not been impacted. However, the people there that are left contradict that. They say they cannot function right now because of the workload, because of being told they have to be careful with every communication that they send. So we know that the impact, there is impact, right? Beyond, you know, as a result of the reduction in force. So that's what I would.
That's what you're saying. Okay. And I will, yes, Marcy.
Question related to all that, wondering, you know, this idea that they're returning education to the states. How does that apply? Is there any idea of how that applies to adult ed funds? You know, because it does sound from the reduction, well, the reduction in force might still hit those 8 people. It's not just the 23.
It's actually down to 6 now because 2 of those people who are on administrative leave have since left. So we're down to 6 people.
But so like review of state plans or like all of the
Yeah.
different things
All
that
the
would
things that
have
need
to
to
be done.
happen.
Right.
It's a big question how they're going to.
Like,
handle it.
they don't know, they're trying to figure out how to manage the situation.
Yeah.
right now.
Because the reason I'm asking is just that, I think in a lot of states, the kind of idea that, these funds, well, first of all, might be coming down from Department of Labor.
Mhm.
That it just will be the WIOA, stuff on steroids. And that so much of the adult learner piece, I mean, not to sound naive, that this is like in the old days, we were advocating that, custodial parents of young children, people who literally were not looking for work, or older people who were out of the workforce, should not be, cities and states should not be dinged for those people not meeting the workforce outcomes of WIOA. So like a good thing about returning it to the states would be that you just didn't have to have these adult learners that you thought it was critical to serve, be used against you on performance measures. So like you could see a better future for folks, trying to run like a coherent, system that really met the needs of the folks they're working with. But, yeah, like it just feels hard. It's hard to, where would those conversations happen, I guess? And I guess it's all like, it's hard to figure out what's going on because it's all coming down, in such a, sort of behind the scenes way.
Mhm.
You find out after the fact, and it's not a table set that people can go to right around the same.
No,
I wanted to like just, I don't want to take a long your section time. One of the, one thing that I really want to be able to educate people about is, there are some of us who've been around long enough to remember before we had a, federal monitoring through the NRS, and our system there was a lot of fraud and corruption going on at the state level related to adult ed. I was part of a state system when that monitoring found 2 programs in our state. One in particular, the woman went to prison over it. She had been basically using the adult ed funds for nearly 12 years on like her own personal thing. So this idea that putting it to the states is going to get rid of these, corruption and fraud was going on at the state and local level, and the federal monitoring put an end to that. So I feel like we need to remind decision makers about that, because people who were around back then when that was all uncovered, I mean, it was pretty egregious. Some people were using adult ed funds for after school programs, like the whole state. And there were all kinds of crazy things happening with our funding. So I feel like we need to remind people.
Well, that's an argument for putting all the block grants together into one big block grant and letting the state take responsibility for it. Because then they could use it for after-school programs, and it wouldn't be designated funds for adult ed. Margie, to follow up on what you were saying, as you well know, not all states every state has a different way of dealing with the federal funding stream. And many states don't accept the full amount that they could get from the feds because they don't like the reporting system. They don't like the NRS because they want to be able to help the people you were talking about, people who don't have to show outcomes in relation to employment, career skills, and so forth. So I think your point is an interesting one. It could go, I think, either way. It could go to what you were saying, of states being able to help more of those people. But it also could mean that states will do less support of employment preparation type work. So.
And this, I think, illuminates one of the difficult aspects of advocacy is we are in a situation right now, what are we asking for? We're talking about what ifs on all these different things and the directions it's going. And, I appreciate what you said, Jeff, having that piece of direct to your member of Congress. So having that ask in hand, being clear, and then across our communities being consistent in that ask. Because you have, everybody within our communities having different pieces and they're bringing forth, they don't know which direction to go either. So that consistency of message is so important in that ask. And I will say this, from TESOL's perspective, we're ready to, with NCL, to collaborate more on what we could do to make sure that our messaging is consistent there. And with that, because I know we're going to get to the end, I don't want to keep everyone waiting. I always have to have shameless plugs. Oops. Yeah. We will be having an advocacy day in June on the Hill. Now our advocacy day covers the whole gamut of the levels of education, K through 12, adult ed, higher ed. We have, some focus on immigration, family, communities, et cetera. Matter of fact, I was just had an email to Julie with a copy to you, Margie, asking if she could come and speak. So it's on my computer right now. I was in the midst of getting those invites out. But we'll have that in June. And Jeff, maybe that's something you and I can coordinate, make sure that we have our messaging, especially for our adult eds piece. Well, not just well ahead of that. June is going to be here before you turn around twice. But and then this Friday, we have put together a panel to talk about implications to the English language teaching field. That will be this Friday afternoon. We're still in the works trying to get that together. Some of the things that we're doing at TESOL, and then let me get and just these slides are available on, is it WOVA, however you pronounce it, WOVA? Is it not working? If it's not working, okay. Well, email me, I'll get you the links or whatever. And then this is just an example. If you wanted to go, and let's say you wanted to make your member of Congress aware that, this is important, protect the sensitive locations, make this possible. I'd like you to co-sponsor, or thank you for co-sponsoring, whatever. When you go in and do an action like that, you've automatically signed up for our alerts in that. So that would be how you would sign up. And then we have examples. You can see our state, this is our resource page that we put together. It has priorities, position statements, take action, community and colleague resources, and our advocacy assistance. And this last one is our advocacy assistance. We do reach out and say, hey, if you have an advocacy issue and you need some support, just want to talk through things, that's fine. Let us know. We're happy as we can to come alongside and provide support for you. I just had actually just had a call last week, and I'm trying to get some resources together with the impact on the funding for refugee resettlement. A lot of programs are being dropped. And so how do we get those resources out? Where are they? I know we've been talking about links and other things, but I was like, well, this is something we need to put on a priority list as well, how we do that. So that's just an example of that. Sometimes people call in and say, can you please get me a visa? I said, that's not the advocacy assistance we do. So, okay. And with that, just thank you. And that's, again, I'm sorry with all the QR codes, but I think that's the easiest way. That's, you can always just copy it down. Or if you say, man, Jeff, I don't know how to spell your name, just do advocacy@tesol.org. That'll get to me as well. I check it every 3 months. Just joking. I do check it more often than that. Rain or shine. Okay. So thank you all. And I know we've kind of talked a lot about the things. And one of the things that I like to do in this session is to have you talk more about what you're advocating for, what you're doing. We didn't get to that. I apologize for that. But if that's something you want to put on the chat, on the WOVA app, just talk about some things that you have done. I'd love to hear from it. And if you've got a success story, I know COABE does a great job in advocacy and especially elevating the adult learners. TESOL has a little space to talk about the ELT professional and their success. And if you have a story you want to tell, we've got a platform. We'd love to hear from you. We can rotate that in as well into our stories. So, but thank you to COABE for everything they do. I know they do a lot on the advocacy front. I've got their federal update. I think is well, it's against yours, so maybe I shouldn't say what. No, it's at 2:00 today. It's at. So anyway. So, well, thank you.